Hey, hello, and welcome to the Content Advantage, a talk show about content for content professionals. I'm Scott Abel, and joining me today is my co-host, Megan Gilhooly.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Great. It's good to know that our microphones and speakers are working now.
So far, knock on wood.
Clear.
Very nice. Well, we're ready to dive into another Content Advantage, and I want to start by introducing our guest, Mike Iantosca, Senior Director of Content Platforms for Avalara. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm just thrilled and honored to be here with both you and Scott today. An exciting topic of intelligent content delivery. Scott,
Yes.
you and I have, we've had long conversations over this past several years, and I think the industry is not only ready for this topic, I think they're clamoring for it.
Excellent.
Agreed.
Well, we've got lots to talk about, and Megan and I are both curious to tap your brain for a minute and see what you're thinking. But before we do that, let me tell the audience members who may not have attended a Bright Talk webinar before what they can do during the show. First, know that the show is being recorded, so about 30 minutes after the show is over, you'll receive an email indicating that there's a link available. It's the same link, in fact, that you're using to watch today's live show. It'll be a link to a recording that you can watch on demand and you can share with others. Also, we can't see or hear you, so you don't have to worry about your camera or microphone. You can ask a question at any time by using the Ask a Questions feature located underneath your webinar viewing panel. Clicking that button will open up a little text-based window and allow you to submit a question to Megan and I. We will field as many as possible with Mike and with the time remaining in the show. We're going to allow him to walk through a pre-defined list of some explanatory questions for you, and then you'll be able to ask questions about the subject on your own. Additionally, there's some content provided by Zoom and Software and the Content Wrangler, and there's also content about Mike, so in case you'd like to reach out to him after the show, located in the attachments section of your webinar viewing panel. Clicking that button will open up a little kind of a document repository. You'll be able to browse what content we've provided and access it during the show. All right, Megan, let's tackle today's subject.
Very, very nice. All right, so before we dive too deep into intelligent content, Mike, can you just give us a little introduction into who you are and what your connection is to this topic?
Oh, thanks, Megan. Appreciate it. Welcome. First of all, I'm broadcasting today from the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains in western North Carolina, near Asheville. So just looking out at a mountainscape next to me here. This year I'll be celebrating my 40th year as a professional content practitioner. I spent 38 of those years at Big Blue at IBM, where I began with structured content from the very get-go, at the very dawn of intelligent and structured content. It all happened one day when Charles Goldfarb, the inventor of markup language, dropped by my office to review a patent disclosure I had done for one of the earliest electronic book technologies. And he took me to the dark side and explained to me what structured content was all about, explained it in the context of music, which we both love. And mind you, this was a number of years before the emergence of the web and HTML. So that was the beginning of a very long and interesting career.
Wow, and having a name drop of Charles Goldfarb on our show is extremely cool to me. Of course, that's a very geeky, nerdy thing for me to say. Nerd in me is very excited about that. And I love it that he used music as an example to teach you, because it's one of the best ways I found to help people understand what we're trying to talk about at a conceptual level, as opposed to down in the weeds. And speaking of the weeds, why don't we tell the audience a little bit about the subject today? Why do you think that we need an intelligent content delivery strategy?
That's a great question. Scott, we're not just talking about, the next greatest portal or channel or search appliance strategy. We're really talking about what I call intelligent omnichannel content retrieval. I use the word delivery, but retrieval is really the key here. And enabling that intelligent retrieval is how it happens under the covers is something most shops punt to. They punt to the content management and delivery systems, praying that they're somehow going to make it magically personalized and magically componentized, because they have a vague and sort of difficult understanding of what really is happening under the covers. So they spend all their time creating this intelligent content in structured forms, but very little on the enabling what I call the intelligent content assets that are needed to enable the delivery side of the equation to actually deliver a personalized and customized content experience.
Yeah, I think
I love that you
onto that.
I love that you focus on the idea of retrieval. I think that that's really, really smart. And of course, retrieval is sort of caused by and impacted by the delivery, right? So what is it about delivery? Why do we need to talk about the delivery of content?
Yeah, so back in my old shop, really some brilliant folks came up with I guess we did as a team, but came up with a content strategy statement that lives on today. It's sort of caught fire and everybody's adopted, or many people have adopted it. It sort of went like this: deliver the right content to the right person at the right time and the right experience. Notice the first word in that strategy statement: deliver. Right?
Yes.
Yep.
And how about person?
That's true.
Personalized content, right? And how about time? If you sat down and asked most shops, how do you enable the at the right time portion of that statement? You draw a lot of blank stares. We've been chasing this goal for the better part of 3.5+ decades, and we're still not there. It's not what we envisioned when we started out on this journey. Most of us made this incredible investment in intelligent content, right? And we define what intelligent content as modular and structured,
semantically rich.
Semantically rich, separating content format from presentation, right? Highly predictable for machine processing, right? That kind of thing. The problem is that most shops have only gone half the way there. They developed the content if they were smart, they used something like Ditto or some other DOM format, right? Some other document object format, whether it be JSON, I don't care what it is, and if they've been lucky, they avoided the trap of Markdown and ASCII doc that doesn't allow you to create objects at any molecular level,
right,
out of it. But they stopped there, and they didn't realize that in order to enable intelligent content retrieval, you have to have something in addition to the content or the structured intelligent content. You have to have these intelligent content assets that I define as, and I'll just go down a quick list, which is, you need your terminology, your taxonomies, your ontologies, and your knowledge graphs, and maybe even your synonym rings. And we can get into talking about some of that, but that's the fuel that's missing, that people have only gone half the distance, and they ignored the second half. And now they don't know where to go. They don't know how to enable AI and machine learning, and they want to know, how do you do it? So that was the subject of my paper and my presentation. That I'm not sure if you have it on your download here, but if folks don't have it, they can go to my website. It's thinkingdocumentation.com. I encourage people to go there, download it. It's free, and you can trust me because I have nothing to sell you. I work for Avalara, which is a tax compliance and type of software services and reporting. And unless you want tax software, and I can give you some great tax software, I have nothing to sell you in the content space. I'm a builder. I've been a system builder for almost my entire career when I started. So I'm really just trying to see the industry push forward, as are people like Val Schwisher, yourselves, simply a whole bunch of really intelligent folks, including our friends here at Zoomin.
Mike, I've heard you talk about, I've heard you talk about a lot of things regarding intelligent content. As you mentioned, we've sat around and chatted up the do's and don'ts and the whys and wherefores of this subject for many years. But I think you also talked about something about a prescriptive versus a dynamic delivery model. What did you mean by that? And did I get that correct? Or could you help the audience understand what you were trying to say?
Yeah, this is my favorite subject, and it has been since probably about the mid-1980s. And that is that we recognized very early on, when we were developing structured content, that the model of content delivery, or the whole model of content experience, has been a failure mode model. And it's been that way since the beginning of time. I mean, since the first cavemen and women scribbled on the walls of the rock in the caves, right. It's been, because you need to find something out, because you either failed at something or you need to learn something. Okay. The dream, the at the right time, the right content at the right time mantra has always been, let me find out what you're trying to do. Not just lightly, not just some personalized information, but let me really try to find out and determine what scenario you're trying to accomplish, especially with the complex products that we have today that often require not just one product or one task, it's a multitask scenario, for example. And so that we put together prescriptive content that's usable for everybody, but really nobody in particular. And so what we do is we tick off all our customers and we make them go through what I call Where's Waldo? Go discover, go find the information. And then what the improvements have been so far is, well, I'll tell you what, we'll narrow your search down. We'll give you bots, which is maybe a narrow answer, not really a scenario, or we'll just do a little sub-search and give you a subset of information, but you still have to go do, I don't know, you still have to act like an archaeologist and go look for the stuff. What we really want to bring to you are complete, highly personalized, hyper-personalized collections of content where we don't prescriptively assemble it manually, nor do we prescriptively create the navigation through it. We actually have enough intelligence in the content and in the content assets that go with it to do that, and do it predictably at the moment that you're trying to do something, whether it be, you're in the marketing side and you really want to dig deeper and we bring you the right content, or you're in the tech doc side and we really want to bring you solutions that we might have that you don't even know about, and we can enhance discovery as well as getting it done. Let me give you just a little bit of a model for that. It's great if I'm going to have a wedding on the beach, I can say, hey, I need some officiants. Go find me some officiants in the area. But what if I want to plan the whole thing? I want to know, what houses I can rent. I want the officiant. I want the chairs to go on the beach. I want the, a whole litany, the caterer, everything, the music. Give me the complete collection of resources and information organized in a way that's specific to my location on the Outer Banks of North Carolina in, Corolla. So that's a solution, right? That's not just a little bot answer that says, help me calculate the square root of whatever,
Right. It sounds like maybe you've planned a wedding recently.
About 7 years ago, I was married on the beach of North Carolina.
Oh, okay. All right, good. I felt like there was a little personal aspect to that. Very nice. Very nice. So one thing that comes to mind, so I think you're spot on in terms of the content really needs to be intelligent in and of itself. One thing that comes to mind is the fact that sometimes you have a tech talks team that's created this intelligent content, and then you maybe have a marketing team or a support team that may not have created such intelligent content. They're still trying to get up to speed just creating content, right? In Tech Docs, of course, we've been talking about the right content in the right place at the right time for the right person for a decade, right? And I find that a lot of other content teams are just stepping into that. And so these create content silos. Now, I'm a big believer that silos can actually be really healthy in many ways, and that the best way to handle silos is to build bridges between them rather than break them down. But how do we pull enterprise content silos together? Like, do we need to break them down? Do we have bridges? How do we handle all of these different content silos?
This is my favorite subject of all. It really is, because people have been misdirected when we use the term content silo. Okay. The first thing we need to do is break apart something that people are combining into one. Okay. You've got content production on one side and you've got content delivery on the other side. Unfortunately, what people have done is combine these two as a single unit, and they haven't broken them apart. And what that really does is it locks you in, right, to specific formats, specific tools, specific channels. What we really need to do is embrace what I call the content production silo. Okay. You don't develop marketing content anywhere the same as you create learning content. You don't create learning content the same as you create technical content. These are specialized systems, right? You might be using, I don't know, Salesforce, maybe for support. You might be using AAM for marketing content. And you might be using, a CMS, for developing, structured content or intelligent content, or even, Git or GitLab or something like that. It's perfectly fine to have different formats. It's perfectly fine to have different content models. Actually, I know that's a shocking statement, but right, and I can catch a lot of this if I don't explain myself here. But I think you'll understand that these concerns can and must be separated. The biggest mistake, the biggest architectural blunder any organization can make is trying to either do it all all-in-one solution and not separate these concerns. Or worse, tie your content retrieval strategy to your content delivery channel, right? That is like the last thing you ever want to do. It's a dead-end approach, because now you're tied to a single channel. Even if you try to make it canonical with APIs and serve other channels, you're still tying yourself to a single channel. What you really need to do is put what I call middleware between these two layers. You can have multiple different content production silos that are unique and even have different models. And you can have many channels, omni-channel delivery. What you need is omni-source retrieval. Remember that term, omni-source retrieval. You need to be able to have a little piece of middleware, sometimes not so little, that actually where all the content from the production part of a layer can feed into, and that's where all of your intelligence lives. That's where all of your taxonomies, your ontology, your knowledge graphs live, along with your content, and it's pooled with content from all of these other source silos. What we're doing is we're omni-sourcing, not from the original sources, but from what I call a content lake. And the notion of a content lake is really analogous to the way we've been developing web applications for what, 2 decades now? A 3-tier classic architecture: front end, middleware, back end. I'm almost stunned that the content industry has not embraced a 3-tier architecture for content. It's so obvious, but even to me, it wasn't obvious for quite some time, let alone once you have that middleware, then you need to be able to retrieve that content from that middleware. And that's where all that content intelligence comes into, the taxonomies, the knowledge graphs, and those things.
And could you briefly, before we move on to the next topic, explain a little bit about each one of those things, ontology, taxonomy, and knowledge graphs, and why they fit into your vision?
Absolutely. This is really the crux of it. People have made it sound far too complex and more complex than it is. It really is not complex. It's first of all starts with objectifying your content. Let's just leave that on the table. Many people who have done data have done that. It's not only creating objects, articles and topics. You want to be able to create sub objects within those articles. So for example, if you're using data, for example, because you've got natural containment, that's easy, right? You get it out of the gate. You don't get that with Markdown or ASCII doc, right? And you can even wrap divs around containers, around things to create what we call micro documents. So now you have objects to which you can assign intelligence. You can add labels to those objects, taxonomies, and you'll need a couple of critical taxonomies. In fact, most of us do content journey mapping, but do we make that a taxonomy and then take that taxonomy and label our content with the phases of the journey as a temporal piece of information? No, most of us don't, right? So we need to create those taxonomies. The problem is a taxonomy is static. It's a classification of things. It's a hierarchy. But the problem alone is that it doesn't really tell you anything about relationships between one object and another. And that's what an ontology and a knowledge graph are all about. It describes the relationships between these objects. So the difference between an ontology and a knowledge graph is an ontology is like a generalized subject area. I use taxes or software or something else. It's not specific to your business or your specific domain. And there's a bunch of them out there you can use, or off the shelf ontologies that you could use. But it's not going to help you do the retrieval, but it will create the basic relationships between the trio of relationships between a subject and an object. And what connects them is literally a link. The middle link that connects a subject and an object together, it's called a triple, is the predicate, the verb. Mike attends Harvard. Okay,
right.
Attends is the predicate, right? Mike, and this is a living thing. This is a living map of links. So when you do that mapping in an ontology, now you know that these things are linked, and an ontology can actually create the network or the sort of almost a mind, a mapping of all of these things. The thing though is that it doesn't give you specifics, right? It doesn't give you specifics about your business and your product. Right. That's where a knowledge graph is kind of like an enhanced ontology, right? They're both based on the same triples, right? They're both based on the same thing, the same linking mechanism, but it adds another data layer, specifics, what we call edge data. And it links them together so that an ontology can actually can recognize patterns and indirect relationships with collections. And this is what the middleware, the content lake, uses to actually go find all the pieces to assemble based on the personalization intelligence that you've gathered from what the user has said or what they're doing. And that's how you can do the retrieval. And that's the magic behind enabling AI and machine learning out of a very large corpus of content objects. So you need the objects, you need the micro docs the best you can to be able to break it down, because you're going to want to assemble, varieties and variants of these things that are very specific to getting a particular scenario or task done. And you need you need your terminology, because the terminology is what unites your content, your words, and your content with the consistency of your taxonomies, your ontologies, and your knowledge graphs. And if you don't do the groundwork and do your terminology and have a common terminology base, you're lost. You better not just start over again and do your terminology first.
Well, that's definitely a lot. And while it is complicated, I think there's a difference between being difficult and complicated. Complicated, I think, implies that there might be a lot of moving pieces, and we have to figure out how to bring them all together in an orchestrated fashion, as you recommended. But how does delivery impact the unified content experience goals that many organizations are trying to provide today?
Yeah. So basically, our customers don't see our content in silos, right? In delivery silos.
Right.
The best I've seen so far in practice has been, okay, I've got a documentation website. And then you come to the site, and what they've done is they slapped portals onto the same screen, right? They didn't really integrate the content itself. They didn't integrate the actual elements of the content. So you have your support content. Oh, great! You have a little portal over here for the content, or a link, to the support section, or the marketing content, and they can get a little fancy with it. But they've really not been able to take all of the objects from all the different silos and then omni-source create the deliverable from, say, that content lake. And so they're faking it is what they're doing. And they can only get so far by faking it. And they're beginning to realize, well, we really can't get to AI and machine learning from here. There's really no path to it unless you do the sort of building block approach I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's the secret. And I think you're right. It's a driver when they've had the aha moment that, what we're doing now is not going to help us do what we want to do in the future. They have to retroactively go back and say, okay, we invested in this idea of structured content, but how can we actually deploy it and make it valuable for the business, not just for the people publishing the content?
Exactly. No, you're 100 spot on. I think we spent so much time investing in the difficulty of moving to structured content. And some teams are actually going so far as to do taxonomies and apply labels, which improve search. But again, you're just putting lipstick on a pig. You're improving search. That's great. Right. But that's not the future. The future is hyper personalized, proactive, auto assembled and auto navigated content. And I'm not talking about just bots, right? The whole thing today is bots. Oh, let's get a bot platform and let's give answers. Well, guess what? If your content isn't objectified, if you can't break down into and have micro documents within your topics, you really can't deliver an answer. All you're doing is delivering an enhanced search. You're still making the user read the whole article or the whole sub collection to go find the answer. So you really need to get to the micro document level to be able to give very precise answers. But then again, that's only individual answers. That's not solving a multi-product or a multitask scenario, which is why, some teams are smart enough. They not only do they create a content strategy or a content model, they actually create a content access model strategy, which is very little talked about. And a content access model strategy really talks about not just individual answers or individual tasks and topics. It talks about scenarios. And if we map that to our intelligent content retrieval, we can start doing things like patterns and model patterns based on what our clients have been assembling themselves as custom collections or custom or a combination of searches and patterns, so that we can actually use that. I mean, we create what? In Ditto, we create relationship tables today. What is that? It's a pattern of linked content. Gee, you think maybe we can use that to create something called, you won't find this on the web, I call it scenario graphs, right? The next layer above knowledge graph. And that you won't find a single reference on the web to that because I literally coined that term out of the blue. But it's the notion of let's just not get topics or individual answers. Let's actually create complete solutions that are auto-generated and auto-assembled.
I've been taking down all kinds of new vocabulary words today. Apologies,
Yeah.
I keep writing them down.
We're going to need a taxonomy just around what Mike has talked about. We'll get to creating that. So, hey, Mike, you said you spent, I think you said 38 years at IBM. Is that right?
38.
That's a long time to be at one place.
Yes.
But to be at sort of the creator of DITA, that's incredible, right? That's such a big thing. And I can see your passion for micro content. Now, there are a lot of people out there in the world that don't have the structure in their head the way that you have, right? So, and I'm wondering, you come from an organization that's massive and huge and built this idea of structured content, and presumably probably had a lot of methodologies and models that would lead right into that. So now you've made a shift to a potentially smaller company. What kinds of challenges are you facing now that you're out there? I'm going to call it in the real world, right? The post IBM world, where now you're trying to fight to get structured content with people who didn't like breed this and grow this from the beginning.
Oh, that's a great question. And I'll make one correction. I don't consider myself the inventor. I was on the team that invented DITA.
Oh, right. IBM's the inventor. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So just a little backstory there before I run on to the next question, to the rest of the question, which is DITA almost didn't happen. It came very close to never existing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was at the SGML 97 conference. I had been participating in something called Monastic SGML with a whole bunch of other people to create a lightweight version of SGML. And it got recast ultimately as XML. And I came back running back to the conference, and I wrote a white paper and actually interviewed directly, had a face-to-face with the CEO of IBM at the time. And the plan was to put out just another SGML DTD called WebDoc. And I was vehemently opposed to it because I had learned and we had developed this lightweight web-oriented version of XML. And that resulted in a rather contentious discussion, if you will, that lasted for a few months. And I won that battle and was able to form the team that created DITA. I give most of the credit for DITA to folks like Michael Priestley and Don Day as the brain trusts of it. But there were 12 of us on that team. And very sadly, a middle manager joined the team halfway through the process and filed the patent and left half the team off the patent. So that's something you won't find on Wikipedia. But we did get T-shirts that said DITA. So
the politics.
There you go.
The politics, but we're a team, and it was a tremendous asset. Our intent was to see the industry evolve. It was a clear shot in the dark to donate DITA to Oasis as an open standard, and we literally took the guts of the publishing system that I helped build, because I was also building the systems as well for the new stuff, and we put it in SourceForge. And the goal was, we were hoping that some of the tool vendors, such as ArborText and later Oxygen, Synchrosoft, would jump on board and start developing common tools based on the topic and inheritance model that we created with DITA. And it did. It flourished. And now we have a huge industry, relatively speaking, with thousands of companies using this wonderful, core technology. But you asked a really good question about moving from a large enterprise to a smaller enterprise. So Avalara, first of all, is an amazing company. I'm floored as to the visionary team that I've got here. They were smart. They brought in some real brain trust from other companies. They weren't newbies. Most of them knew intelligent content, and they had made the decision to go to DITA even before I arrived. And so I was retired for 5 months and I was getting a little bored, and the opportunity just hit me in the face. And I said, wow, an opportunity to build this from scratch with people that have the vision and the knowledge and the skill. And I couldn't be happier. We're moving at lightning speed to really build what I consider will be an industry-leading platform in record time, probably a Guinness Book of World Record time. And we already got our content management system. We already got our migration in progress. And we're planning on doing all of the things I'm talking about with taxonomies and the ontologies. I've been playing with Pool Party, a phenomenal tool. We'll talk about maybe some tools, and obviously I'm working with Zoom in here, exploring it as a content lake to actually.
So Mike, I'm going to jump in here and tell you that we are almost out of time. So I'm going to ask you first, can you stay for a few extra minutes and answer a few more questions we have?
I certainly can.
Okay, great. To the audience members who need to go because you may have another appointment or dreaded Zoom meeting to attend next, please know that you can leave and you can come back using the same URL that you're using to watch the show live right now. To watch a recording, you can fast forward and catch up to what you missed. So don't worry about that. Megan, this also seems like a good time for you to tell the audience a little bit about Zoom and software and the connection to the topic of today's show.
Yes, absolutely. So Zoomin is kind of that middleware that Mike has been talking about. Zoomin is a cloud-based platform that ingests technical product content from any source, whether it's structured or unstructured, no matter how it was created or published. And then we deliver it into a documentation portal, into your community, your customer support site, and even into your product itself. And so in this way, it really does bridge the sort of content production silos that Mike talked about, and works off of taxonomies and ontologies and all the stuff that he's talked about, and acts as that sort of middleware.
And Megan, just for people who might not understand where it fits, because middleware assumes that it's somewhere in the middle, it actually is connecting to a content source of some kind. Can you tell just briefly?
So the sources would be your CMSs, the various places that you create and manage your content on one side. And then on the other side is where we deliver it into. So that would be your documentation portal, which either we create or you create inside a community like Salesforce or ServiceNow in your product itself. So you have the delivery on one side, you have the sources on the other, and then I always call it the magic in the middle, right? Because we kind of do pull off magic, and that's what Zoomin is. And so we're very excited that Avalara is looking at Zoomin. So especially after this talk, I'm even more excited.
Well, yes, and there's lots to be excited about. Mike is a wealth of information. And speaking of that, Mike, it seems like you're making the argument for a cognitive content supply chain, which is a mouthful right there, and probably a show in itself, that can provide like one-to-one personalization, and that's built upon intelligent content, including seamless content delivery intelligence. That's a lot of words right there. I think today you've actually coined a few new terms, or at least shared some that you've learned with other people. But are we getting that right? That's what you're asking us to build, a cognitive content supply chain?
Yeah, I am. What I'm asking is for the content owners to create the intelligent content and the intelligent content assets. Okay. And then, and then lean on folks like Megan's team here with Zoomin, and then there's similar offerings from other vendors, and examine those to make use of those intelligent assets. Our customers want solutions. Okay, they don't want just individual answers. They don't want to wade through thousands of pages to find what they want. Sure. They want really targeted solutions, and so we need to achieve hyper personalization. And I'll give a plug for one book I know others have, Val Schwischer's new book, the personalization paradox.
Yeah.
Is something that, if there's one book you buy this year,
it's that
buy
one.
That book.
Yeah.
The other one I strongly recommend everybody get is a free download of a PDF called the Knowledge Graph Cookbook.
Yep,
If knowledge graphs seem foreign to you, by the time you finish reading this little document, you'll be almost.
Oh, look at that! Of course, Scott has it sitting right there.
I can't help it. It's a content nerdy thing to do, and it just was too appealing to resist.
It is. I think they put together a lot of the pieces, and I think, as Megan said, we have to push our content vendors, our content system vendors, both our content production system vendors and our middleware vendors. And don't forget, tools like Zoomin aren't just middleware. They actually provide a portal if you need an out-of-the-box portal too. Right. You don't have to use it; it's optional. But the trick is that when you build an ontology or you build a knowledge graph, they're encoded, and guess what? XML, right? Yeah. and the two standards that they're encoded in are SCOAS and OWL. So the first question you should be asking your vendor is, do you ingest, SCOAS or OWL assets and utilize them? If the answer is no, say, I'll come back and talk to you when you do. And I know this is sort of putting the gauntlet down and pressuring the SDLs of the world and the Zoomins of the world and the Fluid Topics of the world is get with it, guys, because guess what? I could build it. I've been a system builder all my life, but I'd have to go get Watson. Watson Studio, and some other NLV stuff. And I'd have to assemble it myself, and I don't want to do it. That's just a lot of work, and DIY is silly to do today when you've got really great vendor tools out there, and they've spent years actually building state-of-the-art solutions that do this. And I'm going to push them too even further. I'm going to push them all to say, hey, I'd like you really to use, not just rules-based retrieval on things. I really want you to put the AI engines behind it, the ML engines behind it, and get there. So I'm not done pushing. And like I said, my whole goal of presenting is not to bring attention to me. It's to push the industry forward. It's to push everybody forward so that, in the next sessions that we have, the next conferences that we have, I want to see people coming with real implementations. I certainly intend to bring mine, when I'm on my way there now. So
I'm looking forward to great success stories.
Yeah, I was a Zoom In customer before I came on board. And one of the things I loved about it is I was that pusher. I was one that said, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And I was super excited to see that we at Zoom In actually, we rely on that, right? We want our customers to push us, because if our customers aren't pushing us, we're not moving forward. So keep pushing, keep doing it.
And behind the scenes, I'm literally brokering marriages still. I have in the past, and I still do it. I actually take two companies that didn't know each other and say, hey, if you guys combine, you have a whole bunch of white space here you could market to, taxonomy providers, ontology, knowledge graph, providers, computational linguistic providers. I mean, these teams, these companies need to team up and co-offer and integrate their solutions together. One good one is, it's more of a method today than a tool. But even if you're taking different content with different content models from different sources and bringing them into a lake, you don't have to make their content models align at the source. You literally could do it at the content middleware layer, at the content lake layer. Chris Sanders and Simply A, they're masters at this, by the way. They actually have a model where you can map all of your content types and even the elements within those types to sort of a reference common model. And now you don't have to go through the effort of making your support team and your developer and partner and doc and learning and marketing teams all conform to exactly the same content types. You've abstracted it a level. We need some tools in this area. We need some tools that are actually living services that will do that on the fly in real time, for example.
Great advice. Great advice.
Yeah.
So,
maybe you can help us work on that. Zoom In does a version of that, but maybe not quite as detailed as we're getting to, but we're working on it. So we'll contact you.
I have a feeling it will be easy to reach him.
Yes.
He will be ready to influence us. So I think that for audience members, who are watching the show today, there's a couple questions in here. I'll tackle one, and maybe you could do one as well, Megan. I'll tackle the wacky memory one. When DITA was new, I was in a conference. When Darwin information type architecture came on the screen, a deeply religious person next to me was offended by the implication that evolution might be real. We can lose audiences over the darndest thing. So not really a question, but probably one of those wacky things that happens when we talk about structured content in unintentional ways.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the whole notion of Darwin and inheritance, is the core for that. Plus, there's the whole thing about DITA, and I won't go into the other relationships of DITA.
Nice. The other question is, the other question is, if your writing team is already using DITA topic-based authoring, what's the next step? Or what do they need to learn to have them contain the micro documents you mentioned?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay. So the first thing you really need to do is get your content in good shape, right? Quality content is everything. I strongly encourage teams to get a hold of one of the good computational linguistic software. There's a couple out there. There's HyperSTE out there. There's Congree. There's Acrolinx, which I've used for years. They will help you get all of your content consistent, right? Including the terminology. That's job one, right? You got your terminology, you got your consistency, right? You got your consistency of style, consistency of tone of voice, all of those things. That's foundational. If you don't do that, all of the great intelligence that you're going to create on top of it, you're going to be fighting yourself at that point. Once you get beyond that point, you've got your terminology. That's when you start entering the taxonomy world. Now, there's certain tools that I do like a lot because you can go create taxonomies and yourself. You can create them manually. There's some tools out there that are dedicated to taxonomies. One I've been playing with, I really like a lot. is Pool Party. And what Pool Party does is it not only allows you to create a taxonomy. I'm not trying to sell. I get nothing in return, by the way, for mentioning company names. But Pool Party allows you to create your taxonomy and your ontology and your knowledge graph almost as a sort of an integrated whole, so that you don't have to be a genius. And it's very graphical and very point and shoot, and you don't have to know an equation for a machine.
Simplified it, definitely.
It just simplifies it. And there's a couple out there that will do it. The other thing that you want to be able to do is when you create your taxonomies, you want to get that knowledge, those taxonomy labels into your content. And the way you can do that, because there's not enough human power to manually do that in your shop. So the way you do that is some of these tools have what's called an auto classifier. You give it the taxonomy, and in some cases you simply train up a sample body of content, and then it becomes much more accurate than a human, that it batch sprays the content, all of your objects, all of your topics, your maps, and even your sub-elements, if you want to classify your sub-elements, automatically. We did that back at IBM in our marketing area, where I think we had 1,000. It was a taxonomy of 1,000 industry classifications, and it got well over 90%, precision.
Wow.
And none of the humans could actually get that precise. Right. So you don't have to spend a lot of time doing that. Then you move on to your ontology and knowledge graph, and what you want to do for the micro content is, in many cases, a whole task might be enough of an object. A set of steps might be enough of an object. But very often, you're going to want to span elements in data. And you can do that with a div element. And then you can put your taxonomy labels on the div element. And now what you've got is a micro document that coexists with the topic. So you don't have to turn your topics into a million micro documents. You can still use your traditional topic model with maps and submaps to do your traditional kind of content. But now the machine can mine everything down to the sub-element level, but where you've created either element boundaries, or you even spanned element boundaries with divs. And this is something I wanted to do in my last shop, and we just didn't get to it. And I'm doing that, here. So,
Mike, I've got a question too. Somebody once said that you had mentioned on the show that Markdown and ASCII docs might be a bad idea, and they just wanted to briefly, if you would chat about that. I know that that's a subject for an entire show, so we can definitely come back.
I'm no fan of unstructured content, and don't think for a minute that those and some other ones are even remotely structured. Okay, there's no descriptive elements, there's no inheritance. You can't learn anything from the parent of a markdown element, right? It's dumb, right? Basically, the worst part about it is it's not a document object model. A document object model is a tree, and every piece of the tree is contained within something else. That gives you natural object containers,
right? And relationships.
So in order to create objects out of Markdown, or say ASCII doc or anything like it, you'd have to manually go in there and create all your own boundaries. What you'd be doing is you'd be backdooring creating data, basically, or XML, or an XML dialect. And that would be so much work that it would be impossible to do. So, what happens is people become victim to the authoring conundrum, I call it, right? Data is tough to author. Therefore, we're going to use Markdown because we've got engineers that want to write content along with the developers, or we have content coming in from outside sources. Guess what? There's authoring tools out there that don't even show and know that you're using data today. I mean, they're getting that good to where the whole issue of complex authoring is, you got Oxygen Web Author. I helped design and build AuthorBridge, which is now becoming, part of Exiosoft. They announced, which I happen to have as my CMS. And so the whole notion of we have to use a dumb data format that machines can't really read and interpret, it goes away when you have simpler authoring tools. And so the whole argument for it just disintegrates almost entirely.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we don't make it sound like people who are writing in markup are using, or Markdown, are using a dumb language. I mean, it's an unstructured language, right? It's a different language. Now, I always talk about we need to balance the customer experience with the author experience. And if your devs, if the only way to get them to write is to have them write in Markdown, then have them write in Markdown. But then when it comes into that middleware, you have to have a transform. that
you can do
transforms
that.
it to, and that's what we do. That's
Well, and
right.
don't,
That's
and
how
don't
we handle
pretend that
that.
there's not any effort in it. That's the problem. I think what Mike and I are hearing is we hear people excuse away the work required to do it the way that machines would like you to do it, so that the machines can understand and process it, in lieu
Right.
of it's easier for me, so let the machine figure it out. I'll just do the easy thing, and then we'll wait for the magic button to determine all the intelligence. I think that's the problem, right?
Yeah. What's worse is that the smallest molecular component you can deliver or assemble is an entire topic of Markdown. So if you want to deliver precision answers in a bot, good luck, okay? Because you've got nothing to latch onto. You've got no object underneath the topic to do it, and you can't. I guess you can enhance it. I guess you can throw inline tags and throw taxonomy on them. But where's the boundary? How do you know that list goes with the paragraph above it? You don't. And there's no semantic in the world that's going to tell you that, and there's no heuristics in the world that's going to tell you that.
I think
it's definitely more challenging, but it's really important that we let our authors author where they're comfy. That's what I always say. Like, if your authors are not comfy in the tools that they're using, if you're asking them to author, so if you can find something where they're writing in what looks like Word and it's transforming to data on the back end, great. If they're writing in what looks like Markdown, because that's where they're comfy, and it transforms to data on the back end, it's a little messier, but it's doable, right?
And back in my old branch, we actually did that. We actually took my team took the Markdown topics, and we engineered it so that we could do topic refs and did two Markdown topics, and the transforms actually included those in the collections. That's a way around it, right? But again, it's making the excuse that it makes sense if you have third parties contributing content and they can't have the tools that you have. That might make sense, but to punt because your engineers find it too difficult to author in data when all you need is a better data authoring tool is kind of a poor excuse.
Right, and it also doesn't make sense when you talk about the complexity and then try to say that the content complexity is too hard for the developers when they're coding, which is way harder in many respects than just writing in your natural language. It's a second language for them, or third or whatever. So anyway, I think Megan's point was that you can bring in unstructured and structured content and different markup or markdown content in one place. And I think, Mike, your opinion could be summarized as there's a better way to do it if you're trying to do it at scale and automatically, and that maybe you learn the lessons through the Markdown and ASCII route of what's not as easy to accomplish, and you have to figure out how to fix that, which you can either build a fix in between, or you can go back and re-engineer the way you do it and do it in a way that it will automatically process.
Correct.
I guess each company depends on their goals, right? I guess if you're trying to scale, you want to avoid those extra effort steps.
Yeah, and I think, as Megan pointed out, when you're dealing with a content lake, it may be data sourced that's transformed to HTML. It might be Markdown that's transformed to HTML. But you're also dealing with PDFs. You're dealing with PowerPoints. You're dealing with courses. You're dealing with walkmes. You're dealing with application strings, even, right?
Yep.
So it's that you have to honor and combine all these content silos and all these content types at that content lake layer.
Yes.
And none of them are bad. It's just that you'll be able to do more with some of them than you will be with others, because you're never going to break a PDF down into molecular chunks to assemble into custom collections. It's still going to be a PDF, right?
Maybe we should use that content lake analogy and take it a little step further. Not on today's show, but I could totally see how a lifeguard would play a role in a content lake, and how being trained to swim and be safe around the lake before you get in it actually provides some some security there.
Absolutely. So somebody's asking about open source options for data, because there's a big movement. Software companies, of course, are loving to move towards open source, and there's all kinds of tools for developers. So what about content management? Do you know of any open source data related content management, taxonomy, any of those tools?
Oh, there's a bunch of them out there. Alfresco, Drupal. I've actually worked with some of them, or at least worked on teams that use them. They're good. It's a roll your own proposition. It's not. It's not trivial. I mean, you have to have the web programming resources, and sometimes substantial resources, to be able to do things like build auto classifiers to classify your data content and read and extract the knowledge from them. It's such a heavy lift. I mean, back in my old ranch, these systems didn't exist. Zoom In didn't exist. Exiosoft didn't exist. We had to build everything from scratch, from scratch.
Yeah.
I would never do that again. In fact, if I were in a shop back in my old shop, I probably would swap the whole thing out for much better commercial solutions today, because, we just didn't have it. And being a roll your own proposition, you become a CMS vendor at that point, not a doc shop. And I think that you really need to think about, when you look at content operations, which is a combination of content engineering, right, which is what I do, and content ops, which is content production, you really want to put your resources, your engineering resources, into extending really good base solutions and putting value add. Things like, automatic accessibility checking, automatic, trademarking and legal, just enhanced workflows that you want to do. And then that extends these commercial platforms so that you're not spending millions of dollars building these systems that are one-offs and unique to and you're not getting the benefit from all this development, and investment these companies have made. You asked me earlier, what's it like coming from a big company to a small company? It's easier because I don't have the baggage to deal with. So it's a whole lot easier to do this in a much smaller environment. Plus, when you have a team like I have now, not only my immediate team, but my peers who manage content architecture, content design, content development, the visionary kind of people like that, it just becomes a joy. You don't feel like you're working anymore. You're just having fun doing that.
That's awesome. I was at Amazon immediately before coming to Zoom In, and I had a similar thing. There are just certain things in large organizations that don't translate outside of those. And sometimes it makes it harder, but almost always it makes it easier. So totally get that.
Excellent. Food for thought for those of you who are thinking about building something. I think the other part about building is that once you build it, you need to maintain it. And that's no fun. It costs a lot of money. And by the way, if you're not good at it and you rely on 2 people to build something, you better have a plan to replace those 2 people when they're not there anymore.
Yeah. Well, and as soon as the next shiny thing comes in, then you lose funding for whatever you're supposed to be maintaining, and then you have to maintain it with no funding.
Well, the worst scenario is sub teams go off and build their own knockoff systems, and then they leave, and then they come to you and they say, you now have to maintain the thing that I built over here, and you're like, what? And you're stuck because they have to still produce and publish, and you're the only competent engineering team left that probably could do something with it. And that's not an uncommon situation in a large organization.
Yeah, and who wants to be, as a developer or somebody as a system maintainer, who wants to be responsible for that moving target, right? That's not consistent, and as Megan said, maybe in danger of not being funded as well as you had hoped. Big lessons learned today with Mike Iantosca. Mike, thanks for being here today on our show, and thank you to the audience as well for being here and for asking questions of Mike. If you've got additional questions, you might want to check in the attachments and links section of today's viewing panel, where you can locate a link to Mike's LinkedIn profile, where you can send him a message and friend him and keep up with all of his content antics. And there will be many more vocabulary words coming from Mike, I'm sure. In fact, I'm going to be tweeting half of these later today. There were some great ones. Don't forget to check out his blog, Thinking Documentation. Is that right? Thinking Documentation?
Yes, that's it.
Excellent. And don't forget that we have a show every 2 weeks. And if you check your inbox, you will see that our next Content Advantage show is Tuesday, June the 8th. We're going to be talking with global content strategist Alan Porter, who's going to discuss how we speak to our customers, the content that we provide them, and the context in which they consume it. He'll introduce the concept that he calls the CX Trinity, or the Customer Experience Trinity: customers, content, and context, and why every good customer experience is driven by a combination of these 3 critical elements.
That's going to be so much fun, and he is really such a delight and such a super smart guy. So before everyone signs off, we really want to hear from you. Definitely use the 5-star rating in the Rate This tab. Give us that 5-star rating, and then give us some feedback. We read every single piece of feedback, so we want to learn from you how to make our show better for you. So definitely fill that out. And thanks, Mike, for joining us. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Excellent. You've been watching the Content Advantage show. Today's show has been recorded. So shortly after we sign off, you'll get an email with a link that you're using to watch today's live program, which will take you to a recording that you can share with others. On behalf of myself and Megan Gahuli, thanks for joining us and making time today to watch our show. We hope that you'll be safe and be well and keep doing great work. Till then, see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Ensure your customers find the answers they need with Zoomin. Bring together product content from all teams and sources to deliver a unified, personalized content experience. Check us out at www.zoominsoftware.com.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, Mike.
Bye-bye.